Well, happy Friday. Welcome to the last day of the conference. It's been a terrific couple of days with some great programming from our pre-conferences to our workshops to the Women Clergy Gathering. Absolutely incredible stuff, and we're excited for today. There's a whole lot going on, from the Hard Edge Network gathering in just a little bit to the presiding bishop in conversation with Dr. Catherine Meeks and the Archbishop of Canterbury, and our closing worship. But before we get there, we want to share a couple of videos that our friends from St. John's Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. have given to us. The first is about their mural project. This was a project that they undertook once the church needed to be fenced off for security reasons. It was a way to liven up the space where they invited in local artists that then created murals that protect the stained glass on the church. It's really terrific work that they've done, and we're excited to highlight that. And then the second video that we want to share is about the Bishop Walker School, which is an initiative, ministry of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington that helps the underserved community of Anacostia. It's a school for young African-American males, offered at no cost, and is a ministry that is particularly important to the congregation of St. John's, as it is to all the congregations across the Diocese of Washington. But we're going to hear from Rob Fisher in conversation with the new head of school at Bishop Walker, Mike Molina. We're excited for you all to hear a little bit about Bishop Walker School, and we hope that you enjoyed this video from St. John's and the conversation between Rob and Mike.
Times that are hard, times that are testing, times where we need to find our courage and our inspiration, that's our reminder to look up. And the art that you all are going to bless this building with is going to remind the people to look up in this time. We pray that you will make us instruments of your peace. When we get discouraged, help us be there for one another in the way that you are there for us. Pray that this artwork will lift spirits heavenward, that it will encourage your people with hope, that it will spread grace, and that it will inspire us all to work for justice, to love one another with compassion, and to do what we can with our lives so that it will be on earth as it is in heaven. In your name we pray. Amen. I'm really glad that we can have this time to have this conversation, Mike. It's always great to talk with you. We met each other about a year ago at the Bishop Walker School dinner at the cathedral, which was before you even began. And I understand your first day was actually July 1st, 2020. It's a pretty eventful time to come into a really important school in our community doing vibrant work, but in the middle of a pandemic. So just to kind of start off, love for you to share about what called you to the role that you are in now.
Well, I'm blessed. Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me virtually into the space, and you know, we are connected in multiple ways, and I'm learning more about how connected we are and how much we benefited from your parish and all of the work that you lead there. Well, so I'm blessed. I have two parents who were educators. My mother was a special education teacher in New Orleans public schools. I grew up in New Orleans. My father was a college administrator, but they were Black Catholics in New Orleans, which is a very Catholic city. And my dad actually left high school to go to the seminary for 4 years. So he actually got his college education in the seminary, Catholic seminary. And then he and my mom separately moved to New York and became educators, and were introduced by a mutual friend who said, I know this guy from New Orleans, I know this girl from New Orleans, and they connected. And then, you know, their lives were lives of service. Growing up, money wasn't the thing, fame, power, none of those things were, you know, aspirations in my household. It was the life of Jesus. How can we live up to the model of Jesus as teacher, Jesus as servant leader, Jesus as, you know, worker, a person who worked. And so my whole life, my idol, you know, was always Jesus. That was the model for me. And so my life has taken a lot of, you know, fortuitous turns. Ended up in New Haven, as I know you were at New Haven for a while, at Yale Law School, and, you know, blessed to meet my wife there. But while we were there, you know, we worked in schools. We worked in New Haven public schools, Roberto Clemente Middle School out there. I don't know if you would recall that school. And worked on some criminal justice reform work, and really, you know, were introduced to change that can happen when you connect with the community, identify what the needs are, and try to be a part of serving those needs. So I had, after law school, kind of went more in the reform, the policy arena, but I'd always worked with schools. I'd always worked in education policy reform, you know, some fashion that was related to education. And then about 20 years ago, you know, frustrated with policy and that kind of work, I said, let me time out, and I want to teach. And so I actually stopped and taught high school English for 2 years at Balboa High School in San Francisco, and had this completely transformational experience. It was extremely diverse. I had Samoan students, and Filipino students, and Black and Latino students. Just the spirit of community we were able to build as writers, and you know, was a dramatic revelation of like what means the most to me. And so it was a little bit of a journey, you know, to reconcile not being a lawyer after getting a law degree. It took a little while, but once I made a decision, it was done. And so that led me to a number of different institutions, which ultimately led me to the Bishop Walker School. So this school is a crystallization of all of my endeavors in any arena of professional life. But more importantly, it's the place where I finally found where I could live out every part of what I want to be in the world, because we talk Christ here. We talk God, and that's something that hasn't ever been a part of other work that I've done in secular environments. So I think the call was a long time coming, but you know, the fact that I was called at this time is not lost upon me. There must be some reason that I'm here to help us through this era. So you know, and I'm curious about you as well, because I know you've made a huge change across the country to come to Washington, D.C. What was the calling to make that move for you?
Yeah, well, first I've got to say thanks be to God that you did answer the call. You know, your reputation preceded you. Before you arrived, people said, we're so fortunate to have somebody who brings what Mike brings. And absolutely, it's, you know, not just anybody could come in and fill into the role that you were there to fill. For me, you know, we do have some other similarities we didn't know before. Both my parents were educators, and they conveyed to me and my sister as we were growing up that we are meant to serve with our lives. That's what we're here to do. And when I went to college, I realized somewhere along the way that I was different from some of the other kids that I was in school with, because I was looking for what was that thing that God had put me here to do so that I could serve, so I could use the blessings and gifts that had come to me so that they didn't stop with me, that they would continue to, you know, flow out where the world had need. And it took me a while to find that. Well, not a long while, but there were some times where I was really praying hard about what is that calling that God wants for me in my life. The last thing I thought was to be a priest, incidentally. A little block there, that's another story. But I was in San Francisco also, And it was in San Francisco when I was doing policy work with nonprofit advocacy organizations. For me, it was on environmental and on human rights issues. When I realized that my calling was actually to do some things that had some parallels with the organizing work that is done there, but with God involved, which is what I was craving and missing in that work, and actually completed so much of what wasn't fulfilling totally and wasn't the fit yet. And then things started to come into place and come into focus, and I'm grateful for that. And for me being here at St. John's, I will share that when I first heard about this job, I just knew it was a church called St. John's and it was in DC, and I didn't realize the history, and I didn't realize what all has happened on this particular grounds, in this sanctuary, in this location. And I was glad that I got a sense of the parish quickly before I then clicked on the part that talked about their history, because I'd sort of fallen for the parish already. And the reason I did was I got a sense that this place isn't just about the history, but it's about the service. And I think that goes through the DNA of this particular parish and has for generations. And I've reflected, as I'm new to this area, you in your own way are also new to this area. I'm reflecting on what makes DC DC. What is the calling of this community, which we call the DMV, the district in Maryland and Virginia. And service is one of the best qualities that is at the core. It doesn't always come to the fore, but I think one of the things that you and I share, I hope, is to help bring it to the fore for the people, not just in our institutions, but the whole community, as people look to all the work that we do.
I mean, so well organized to make that connection, because it's the same here. So we're, as a tuition-free school serving Southeast DC, that is Episcopal, right? That is attempting to do more than just educate. It's attempting to build souls and set them on a path of a journey of understanding God's role in their lives as young boys, right? And that's something I'll just say really quickly on the side is, I wasn't familiar with the Episcopal Church growing up. New Orleans is Catholic and Baptist, and it's like dominant, right? So as I began to think about this role, I'd say, well, let me find out what the Episcopal Church is about. One of the things that really felt attractive to me was the openness and the idea that, yes, it's Christian. Yes, God is at the center, but it's not dogmatic in the way that a lot of other traditions are. There's a call to inquisitiveness. There's a call to finding your path to your understanding of God and the story of Jesus, and that's what I needed personally to feel okay with coming into a tradition I wasn't familiar with. Once I realized that it was open in the way that it is, and that's really been essential here, because we are a service. We are a school, but we have a mission that is a mission of service. And not everyone in our, actually very few of our boys are Episcopal. And not all of our faculty are Episcopal. We have a wonderful chaplain, Father Tim, who goes out and serves the community on our behalf. And I could say more about that specifically, but we have chapel every Wednesday. And in that chapel, it is Father Tim and Reverend Harris, another one of our leaders whose background is Baptist, and they lead together. And it's a really beautiful, ecumenical moment every Wednesday, where the boys understand you don't have to have a specific pathway, but you have to understand God, and you have to understand Jesus, and you have to understand why we serve, like what the purpose of our lives are. And they need it. Children need to feel a purpose. It's essential to their, not just spiritual development, but their psychological development, their moral development, and in some ways their academic development, because it can guide what they end up studying in life. I mean, that was the case for me. It was the case for you. We want to stir that up in the hearts of our boys.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the Episcopal tradition at our best, there's a rootedness, and that facilitates an ability to also approach everything with humility and being able to feel secure because we have this rich tradition that we have inherited that we're standing upon. And then we can have an openness as well, thanks to that, you know. I also like with ecumenism, I believe Abraham Lincoln was the one who said, whatever you are, be a good one.
Right, that's right.
That's word, those are words that I find in DC are good words in a lot of ways. I would love to hear you share a little more about the work that I know you do at Bishop Walker School to not just focus on the children, but on their whole families.
Absolutely. So, you know, a child represents the hopes, the dreams, the greatest investment of a family. And that's the most beautiful endeavor humans can take is to create new life, raise that life, set that life forward. Khalil Gibran, a great poet, says, you know, we are the bow, they are the arrow. They do not belong to us, they belong to God. We do our best to set them off. And so what, you know, to keep going with the analogy, the bow needs to be strong and resilient, right? Like it needs to be flexible. It needs to be strong enough to be able to allow the arrow to, you know, gather its, you know, momentum to hit that trajectory. So we feel like we have to invest in our moms, dads, our families to make sure that they are resilient and can support the scholars in their learning. So that might mean making sure that their food's secure, right? So we have many parishes who have donated during the crisis, the economic crisis of COVID, grocery cards, right? And so we distribute those to families to make sure, you know, a child can't learn if they're hungry, right? They can't pay attention if their stomach is growling. So we make sure that is set. We have a family assistance fund that's tied to a family engagement, a new family engagement team that stays aware of what family needs are. And that fund is for everything from food insecurity to housing insecurity to childcare needs and any other emergency needs, even utilities, if that comes up in this context where everyone is struggling to some extent. Most of our families are, you know, working class families, or just above the poverty line or in poverty, which means that, you know, a lot of times they are folks who cannot work from home. They don't have jobs that easily translate to home. They may be, you know, frontline workers, or they may have lost their job, right? So there's a lot of challenge that some of our families are facing. And so we have to pour, you know, our love and attention into them right now when they need it the most. And it wasn't a switch, because that has always been the goal. Part of our mission states that we are partner with parents to invest in the whole child. It's just crystallized in many, you know, ways, in many really important ways in this current crisis. So that's core to us, core to our mission. And, you know, just to extend that, we also have been able to find ways to serve the community around us. So in Southeast DC, it is an economically challenged community that's gentrifying. So there's an area, I'm looking at it right now, directly across from us of really low income and substandard housing. And so what we did, because we had so many parishes come and give us resources to help our families, we had our families coordinate food drive, and so that we could serve people who are not immediately part of our community and make sure that the food security, you know, extends out to the community around us. So it definitely core to our mission, you know, part of why we're here. So,
Yeah.
And, yeah, go ahead.
So tell me, I understand that you've got support of many, many parishes in DC. Tell me about how that has been important, how that has help the school over the years.
Well, I've only scratched the surface of understanding how many parishes and, you know, how deeply they've been involved in the founding and the sustainability of the school. Not even just, you know, the very concrete and you know, specific help that we get, but even in the first iterations of the school, when the idea for the school was coming about, parishes were deeply involved in figuring out how the school would honor Bishop Walker, who's beloved to many parishes in this community. So from seed, parishes have been deeply involved, and I'm learning more about that story the more folks I get a chance to meet. But the parishes provide everything from direct resources like the food, right, to books for our library. We get tons of books donated to our library, to volunteers. Our library is completely volunteer staffed, and every single one of them come from a different parish or from parishes around the area. Those relationships with volunteers have led to much bigger kind of gifts from people who love the people who come and volunteer and want to support that. Lunch buddies. So we've gotten people who've been involved in putting the rover on Mars. We've gotten fantastic people to come and speak to our boys because they're members of parishes that are deeply invested in our success. So it's material resource, it's spiritual upliftment in terms of being present and being vocal about why they're present, and tying it to service and explicit about, I'm here with this parish because we believe in these children and we want this school to thrive and survive. So it can't be overstated how deeply rooted these parishes are in what we do here. And as you are clearly aware in this time of COVID, being new as you are to your institution and I am to my institution, one of the big challenges is how are we able to kind of build relationship with all these people who love us and care for us and are invested in us, and how do we cultivate that part of our work in this context? So I'm curious about how you do it. And
absolutely. Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit before. I believe, trust is one of those things when you have built it, when you've earned it, that's what unlocks potential in parish leadership. And I believe, I'm sure in school leadership there are a lot of parallels to that. And it's certainly been on my mind, from the minute I arrived about a year and a half ago, I was thinking about the journey of building trust as a new leader in a new parish. A leader that had a rector before me that was here for 24 years, and the rector before him was here for 30 years. And there are still people that are very attached with both of my predecessors, including family members of the predecessor, two predecessors ago. And that happens over time. It doesn't actually, even in the best case scenario, it doesn't happen instantly, and it really shouldn't. But it happens over experience. It happens over ups and downs. And we had a good first about 7-8 months of like a new term with a new leader, but then we were thrown into this uncharted waters all of a sudden. And then for us, the uncharted waters became new kinds of uncharted waters in dramatic ways, and times of testing, and which turned into times of coming together. Resilience, you don't know about it until it gets tested. You don't know for sure, right? And I was still getting to trust this community myself. As they were learning to trust me, I was learning to trust them. And it was a bonding experience this past year or so that we've been through, watching how people have reacted and responded, and the grace. For me with St. John's, one of the things that I've identified about this place is there is a grace that exists here. And DC, as I believe, I'm sure you have seen as well, can be a very grace-challenged place, this city. And it needs the grace that we offer in Christ's name. And this church has embodied that in various ways at various times. And I think part of our call as a church, as St. John's, is how do we discern how we bring God's grace and embody that and radiate it out today, given not just where the world is and where the city and where the country is, but also where this particular location that we exist on the corner of H and 16th Street, which is now Black Lives Matter Plaza, is the name of the street that used to be called 16th, right on our corner, which is in flux. It's still in major flux. One little thing that I can share, since I'm sitting here in the sanctuary, you can see our stained glass windows are still boarded on the outside. Like most of the buildings in this neighborhood, there are boards over the windows still, but they're coming down. They're coming down rapidly, and we have a fence that was put up by the city around the church, which comes down in a couple days, which is important to happen. As soon as that's down, we're taking the boards off of the windows too. But on the outside of, and by the way, behind me, we innovated and put lights inside the board so it looks like light coming in, which is so important when we worship. But on the outside of those windows where the boards are, we have paintings done by artists from across DC. And the messages of those paintings are messages of inspiration, messages pointing us towards racial healing, towards justice. There's a big mural of Bishop Tutu and writing about Ubuntu and that concept. And we kind of stumbled upon this, but it's that thing that you and I were talking about before of radiating outward and looking for those opportunities that we can meaningfully do that. Well, you know, stained glass windows in a church, and we're talking to a lot of Episcopal leaders out there, and there are a lot of stained glass windows out in the Episcopal universe. Stained glass windows are usually a blessing only for those who are inside the windows. You know, the light comes in, it gets transformed by what the glass does, and then you get the brilliant light coming into the sanctuary that doesn't do anything pointing out. And by putting murals covering all of these windows, we're radiating light out. And that's a thing that even when the boards come down, thankfully, we want to continue that radiating act. One small thing we're going to do is actually light the building at night so light comes out when it can. And we're also going to use the paintings in some intentional ways that they continue to shed their light. The artists were so honored to be asked to do it, while we were so honored to have them. And we bonded. We actually have talked with each other. Paints Institute is the organization that did it, and the language that we're talking about is, you know, we're family now. So these kinds of relationships are the things that excite me. And the pandemic and other challenges that have come have been hard, but they've come with a lot of blessings too, and helping us be the church better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful expression of the role that the church plays, and in Washington, D.C., you know, what I haven't fully grasped, I don't think, but I hope to understand more fully, is that what happens here has national impact.
Yeah.
So there are, you know, senators and people who will go back to their states and carry hopefully a little bit of light with them because of what you do so near, the epicenter of power. So I applaud you, cheer you on.
Yeah, well, thank you.
The opportunity, love to get some young scholars down there to see the church and meet you, and that's one thing we'd love to do is build relationship.
I can't wait. We will do that as soon as we can be physically in person again, which we're all craving right now. But hey, lights at the end of the tunnel. It's just, how long is this tunnel, right?
Exactly. I try not to get too excited, but it does feel like we're if not at the top of the hill, we're almost to the top of the hill, and we'll be coming down soon, hopefully.
Yeah. So a final question I want to ask while we have a few more minutes is what your hopes and dreams are looking forward, looking ahead.
Well, I hope to, very concretely, we are kindergarten through 5th grade. And so thinking about boys, thinking about children and child development, we really need to grow. We need to grow into a middle school. We need to be able to hold them a little bit longer and place them into high school with some more of our guidance. So that's one really concrete thing we hope to achieve. That's not an easy step. It's going to take a lot more resources and a lot of time and planning. but it's something that's within reach in a few years. So we're definitely we're dreaming into that into our future. But we also, I think we have a particularly important role as a school because we're an independent school with a public mission, right? So we have the freedom to innovate in ways that charter schools, public schools don't have because of, red tape and, regulations that are good regulations, and there's a reason for them, but in some ways they can bind a school from being innovative. So we're freed up from that to some extent. But our student and family population is a population that would likely attend a public school or a charter school, and we serve. And so in that kind of spot of, having a mission that's tied to service, but also being a school, we could be a model. I think we could be a model. And so we hope and dream that we can be a model for other schools in this region. And again, because it's DC, you do something great, and a senator from, Wisconsin visits and says, "Hey, I want to bring something like this, back home," right? And you can have that kind of effect. So big dreams, growing as a school, but also being a model for how to innovate as educators.
We never know when things are going to radiate out and ripple out. And we should always live knowing that potential is there every minute, every single thing any of us does anywhere we are, DC or other places. So what a blessing. It's been so great to talk with you. And I'm really excited that we get to share in ministry in this time, in this great city.
Well, I thank you for your questions and your wisdom and sharing your own experience, and we'll have plenty more conversations, I'm sure, in person soon. So
we will. All right. Blessings to you. Thank you.
You as well. Take care.